Hey, hello. Sorry, I'm just getting things organized here. It's a little confusing sometimes with this new webinar jam. Hi, everybody. Hey, let me know you're here. Go ahead and click on the right-hand side. You'll see where it says chat, and that's how you can talk to me. I can't talk to you. I mean, I can talk to you, but you can't talk to me unless you text chat. And for those of you who are watching the recording, just zip on over to a couple, 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and we'll get started. For the rest of you, hang on just a few minutes. So if you haven't taken a webinar with me before, the way to communicate with me is over there where you're all saying hello and hi. Yay, thank you. Let me know how old your kids are and where you are in the world. That's always fun for me to know. I'm in Seattle, as I think most of you probably already know, and we will get started officially in about a minute while people are logging on. So let me just see how people are doing. Looking good. Excellent. And, oh, great. Yay, technology. I can't see the chats. Okay, good. All right, thank you. All right, 2 boys. Thank you, Llama. Nice to know. Oh, excellent. I'm glad we have a school counselor. Fun. Thank you. And if you have a private message for me, if you don't want everybody to see, because right now I think you can all see that chatting, just down there to the at the bottom where it says to everybody, you can change that to the administrator only, and I'll just see your message privately, and it should be flagged. And a couple things, if somebody could let me know if you can hear me okay, that would be great. And we're going to start in just a second. I'm going to have a little tea, and then I'll be official. Great. Oh, everybody's got just the right ages and stages of kiddos. What I love to see. Great. Oh, thank you so much, Caroline, for letting me know you can hear me. That's wonderful. Cool. Thank you. Loud and clear. Thanks, Ann. All right. Cool. Excellent. Sounds good. All right. Well, I always use all of my time when we have webinars. So let me just say hello. I'm Amy Lang with Birds and Bees and Kids, and welcome to my Fancy Pants webinar about keeping your tweens savvy and safe. So for those of you who are not familiar with me, I am a sexuality and parenting educator. I live in Seattle, and I have a mission to help 1 million kids grow up to be whole and healthy adults. And I cannot do that by myself. I have 1 child under my direct control, and I need you to help me achieve my goal. So that means you get to learn how to talk to your own kids about sex. And from what I understand, as it turns out, and what I'm noticing in my own life, is that if you're open with your kids, other kids tend to be open with you. So sometimes you end up being other people's kids' sex educators. So I think it's a great role to have. It can be a little tricky, and if we have time, we can talk about that in the end. But I want to dig in to these must-have talks for parents of tweens. So tweens are kids who are between the ages of about 9 and 12. So we used to call them preteens, and then marketing happened. And now we call them tweens because I guess they're between childhood and adolescence. I don't know. But anyway, so that's what a tween is. And it looks like you all are pretty much in tween land. So before we get started, just a couple things. There'll be a replay of this sent to you within a couple hours. So if you're watching live, yay, thank you for joining me. I always think that's the most fun. If you have questions for me, go ahead and type them in on the side. I'll pause occasionally and scroll back through to make sure we're capturing everybody's information. If you have a question for me that you are uncomfortable asking with everybody's eyes on it, you can either use the little tab down below there on the right and switch it to admin only. That's me, and I will only be able to see it. Or you can always email me or call me. I'm happy to do consultation and see if you need extra help, or just do that over the email too. So anyway, okay, enough of that. All right, so here's the deal. Where are we going to start? So I actually broke this down into 7 broad topics. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So I've got these 7 broad topics. But the first thing I want to make abundantly clear to you all is that you must have the penis goes in the vagina conversation now. If you haven't had it now yet, go wake up your kid or find them wherever they are if you're watching the recording, and tell them the usual way babies are made is that the penis goes in the vagina. that's got to be out of the way. So I'm making the assumption that that is taken care of for the rest of this conversation. So if you haven't had that conversation yet, go on to my website, birdsandbeesandkids.com, and there's some free video there that you can watch that will help you get that particular party started. But I'm making the assumption and judgment that y'all have already broached that very important topic. Okay, so that's where I'm starting from. I'm not going to talk about baby making at all, but I am going to give you some help for talking about other parts of sexuality in general. So we're going to be focusing on, and I've got notes, so you'll see me using those. So we're going to be focusing on their bodies and their brains. That's part of what we'll be talking about. We need to be talking to them about relationships and sexuality. So we're going to have a section, I'm going to talk about more physical things they should know about, and then social and emotional things to focus on. I'll talk about safety, and then I'll cover some tough topics, and then the last thing is what just some conversations you should be having with them about your expectations of them, and really more your expectations about how this is going to roll out in your family life as your kids get older, these conversations about sexuality. So first thing first, I'm going to give you my little super secret, not so secret sex talks formula, because this will be really something that you can use in your conversations with your kids, especially with things that are really more around, like, you need to explain what something is. So this is a formula I use all the time. I use it with Milo. Most of my scripts are created around this very same formula. So it's really easy. Can you see that? It says facts plus values. So this is my secret formula. And if you're a note taker, you're probably going to want to take notes. So it's really simply broken down into facts. What is it? Like, what's a condom? This is absolutely something you should talk to your kids about at this age. What is it? What's a condom? And you explain what a condom is, and I will explain that to you because you might not know. So a condom is something a man uses when he's having sex. It fits over his penis like a glove, and it catches the semen so his partner can't get pregnant or get a sexually transmitted infection. So that's what a condom is. That's the facts part of this formula. The values part is, what do you believe about it? So believe it or not, it's possible to have values about condoms. So my personal value about condoms is that they should be used every single time a person has sex until they've been in the relationship for a year. That's my personal value about condoms. Condoms are awesome. They're good birth control. They're better sexually transmitted infection control. So facts plus values, that's your magical formula. And speaking of values, you are going to be hearing my values as I teach, as always, and so I get that my values are not necessarily your values. I am a white, middle-class woman. I'm a very liberal and progressive thinker. That is how I roll. So it's going to come through in our conversation tonight. And the thing that I want you to remember is that my values are my values, and your values are your values. And it's really important for you to talk to your kids about your values, because they are the one and only thing that you and nobody else can teach your kids. So when you hear my values, if you agree with me, great, that makes life easy. If you disagree with me, that also makes life easy, because it can help you sort out what you do believe about whatever it is I'm talking about. So, sorry, that's my values disclaimer. So, facts and values. Yay, super simple tool. We'll be revisiting that, I am certain. Okay, so let's begin with their bodies and their brains. So here's the deal. Your sweet 9 to 12-year-olds need to know all about puberty. So what this means is that your girls need to know everything there is to know about their bodies, the changes their bodies are going to go through, when those changes are going to be starting, especially with your 9-year-olds, what those changes can look like. They should have books that are really helpful to them in terms of talking about this. You should be having conversations about puberty with your kids, because puberty can be a very confusing part of life. And most kids start puberty, girls are starting, excuse me, as young as 9. Boys tend to start around 10 or 11. So average age of start of puberty for girls, I think, is 10 or 11, and boys it's a little bit higher, like 11, 12. So they need to know what's going to happen before it happens. So this is the time for your kiddos to really get into this topic and to really fundamentally understand as much as they can about it, about their own bodies, and then of course about the other gender's body as well, because they are going to grow up someday and have relationships with people who have bodies that maybe aren't just like theirs. They're going to have friends who are of the opposite gender, and so they're going to want to be a good friend of that person, and one of the ways to do that is to be really well informed about everybody's developing and changing body. So the puberty thing is really important. Don't shy away from it. Sometimes kids will be grossed out by it and upset and uncomfortable. That's a pretty common reaction. Most kids just kind of go with the flow. You know your child, you know your child's temperament. So make sure that they have the information they need. Before they need it. So that means by age 9, they all need to have puberty books so they understand what's coming down the pack. So here's the second part of puberty. This, brain changes. So there are two things that happen at the onset of puberty. So the first thing is that the pituitary gland says to the body, hey, it's time to grow up and change. It's time to change from a kid body to a grown-up body. The second thing that happens is the brain says, hey, it's time for us to go through another round of development. So this can be a really challenging time of life. And when kids are between the ages of 9 and 12, if they're starting puberty, that also means their brains are starting to change as well. There's an excellent book called Brainstorm that talks about adolescent brain and what happens in their brains. And so we used to think that kids, most of their brain development happened from birth to 5. Now we know because of MRIs, there's another round that starts in early puberty when the pituitary gland kicks in, the brain kicks in, and it starts this process of pruning. I'm just going to show you using my hand. So if you imagine, and Dan Siegel is the guy that wrote this great book called The Brain in the Palm of the Hand. So here, imagine my fist is a brain. So this is the brain stem. You can do this too if you feel like it. It's a good way to learn. So this is the brain stem. And then this in the middle, my thumb represents the amygdala. So the amygdala is all about fight, flight, or freeze, all right? So we've got to remember that. Emotions happen here. And then the rest of the brain is the cortex and the prefrontal cortex. So in early puberty, this process of pruning starts. And the pruning is the brain taking away all of those little parts of life that the kids aren't really using very consistently. And the other parts of things that they've learned over the years, those parts get stronger. So if you have a kid who's been playing piano, like my kiddo since the 3rd grade, Milo's now a freshman in high school, his piano part of his brain is super sturdy. His Spanish part of his brain, we lived in Mexico when he was a baby from 1 to 2 years, and when he was 2, he was fluent. 2-year-old fluent in both languages. His Spanish part of his brain, not so strong. So anyway, so this pruning thing happens, and what happens when it gets around the prefrontal cortex is that they are not able to do the work of the brain can't handle its regular prefrontal cortex work, which is things like if-then thinking, emotional control. Basically what happens is they flip their lids. And when your lid is flipped, look who's in charge, the amygdala. So this explains why adolescents have a very hard time being rational and making rational decisions. It's because they can't, because their amygdala is in charge. So while the prefrontal cortex is being pruned, they're really not in their right mind, if that makes any sense at all. I learned this when Milo was 5. It's made an enormous difference to me in terms of how I handle him in his adolescent freak out moments. So when you see your child as they get a little bit older, they'll have this irrational flip out, and you may remember from when you were a kid, that's what's going on. Their brain's being pruned. They can't do this if-then thinking. See, here's my card. No if-then thinking, because they're just literally not capable of it. So why am I telling you all of this? You need to tell your kids all of this so everybody knows what's going on in their crazy brains. And with girls, we of course see hormonal influenced mood swings. So it's kind of like a double whammy. When your kiddos know that this is coming, when they know that they could be in this state where they flip their lids and they're doing all this crying and freaking out for no reason. When everybody knows that and knows there's a physiological reason, it's easier. So please, brain in the palm of the hand is what this is called. By Dan Siegel. You can go look it up on the internet and look at it on the YouTube, and it's great. So talk to your kids about their changing brain and their changing body. Very important. Okay, so the next thing section is about relationships, and it's so important right now to start these conversations about healthy relationships. So they need to know what healthy relationships look like, and you can help them understand healthy relationships by talking to them about what you think makes a relationship healthy. So talking about trust and respect, and making sure that they understand and are seeing in your own life healthy relationships being modeled. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, they're watching us way more than they're listening to us. So they really need to understand what a healthy relationship looks like. And as kids get more towards middle school, they'll start to have more of these sort of boyfriend-girlfriend relationships where they're practicing. We see this in middle school for sure, where they're having definitely boyfriend-girlfriend relationships and dating, but sometimes in younger ages. I remember in the 4th grade, and some of you may remember in the 4th grade, people had boyfriends and girlfriends. So this is a very typical developmental phase. It's very normal, and they are practicing and learning. So part of this time of life is having crushes. So crushes are an excellent opportunity to talk about healthy relationships. So one of the ways you can use crushes is to talk about how, like when your child, your child has a crush on someone, is to ask them questions like, what do you like about them? What kind of friend do you think they are? What kinds of things do they like to do? And you focus on those sort of friendship, relationship aspects because you're building up to real romance, right? Because as adults, we all know that one part of being in a let me say that, in a romance or in a romantic relationship is that we have a friendship with our partners. And so you need to be talking about this with your kids because you're building in. So one of the things about this age group, 9 to 12, is that suddenly things are starting to become a little more relevant. And so when your kid is well informed, by the time they get to middle school, they're going to feel more empowered and more savvy about what's going on and maybe make better and safer decisions. Because remember, the name of this webinar is about helping your kids, your tweens, be safe and savvy. So I have a really excellent friend and mentor, and she's my coach, and her name is Christina Marie Kimball. And we were talking about dating, and she has raised 3 girls. They're all in their 20s and 30s now. And she was saying to me something that I just thought was brilliant. So I just wanted to share that with you about dating, because you need to start talking about what are your family rules for dating. And so this is what she told me. She said, I told my girls that there were 3 rules when they were dating. And the first rule, number 1, is that they need to stay connected. And so what she meant by this was when her daughters had a boyfriend, that they needed to show her that they were still connected to their friends, to their family, having connections and maintaining those connections that were friendship and family connections. And of course, they would continue the relationship with their boyfriend. So I loved that idea because as I know, I remember how I never had boyfriends in high school. And I remember watching my friends in high school who did have boyfriends kind of sell their souls and give up themselves and give up me and give up other parts of their life just so they could be with their boyfriend. And so that is not a healthy way to be in relationship. And I know we've all been there. We've all been there. So we're planting seeds, right? So that's the first rule. Her first rule was to be connected. The next rule she had was that they needed to stay on top of their daily goals. And so what she meant by their daily goals was that they needed to go to school, do their homework, go to work, take care of their family chores or their family work, that they needed to be on top of their daily goals. So I know her girls were swimmers, and so they needed to be competing and swimming and doing their regular life stuff. So this was also a way for Christina Marie to kind of regulate how the relationships were going. So if she saw her daughters kind of going off to one direction or the other, she would be able to help them course correct. So, so that's the second piece, is keeping track of their daily goals. And then the last piece is this. Rule number 3 was future. They had to keep their eye on their future that was all about them, their own future goals. So she wanted to make sure that they understood that, yeah, it's great to have a boyfriend, and if you've always had your heart set on going to Harvard or to Western, and you have a boyfriend and he wants to go to Alaska to go to college, but you've never wanted that, that's not keeping up with your own future. Or if your crazed child is a crazed actress and they need to go to the best acting school on the planet, and that's always been their plan, and suddenly they have a girlfriend who's like, hey, but I want to go to California and take a 4-year gap year, and your child's thinking that that's the way to go, that would be another indication to you and to them that they needed to really think more about, like, what is happening here in this relationship. So I love those 3 rules. So they're sort of the dating rules. And I know you're thinking, my kid is 10. My kid is not allowed to date until they are 40. So this is seed planting. You start talking about this, and when you start noticing it in older kids that you know, or in TV shows or media, there's an opportunity for you to start planting these seeds, because this is really the sort of most fertile garden you're going to have with your kids in a lot of ways, because they cognitively can understand what you're talking about, and it's becoming real to them. It's becoming real to them. So that's my little section on relationships. Let me see what else I need to add here. So the last piece of this about relationships and dating is you really do need to start talking about, when is it okay for your child to become sexually active? So when do you think, and I'd actually be curious to know if you've thought about this, and you can go ahead and answer me over there, because that's always super fun. When do you think it's okay for somebody to become sexually active? So by sexually active, I mean, when is it okay for somebody to have full-on sex of one form or another? So oral, anal, vaginal sex. How old do you think somebody should be? Is there an age range? This is something that you need to think about now, because again, we're planting seeds. And one thing you all should know is that the average age that most kids in the United States, and really most kids worldwide, have sex is about 17. It varies from country to country. It varies from, but not by much, from racial background and ethnic background, and also socioeconomic class. So if you've been thinking about this, no one's answering my question, you're all chicken. So how old do you think they should be? And if you haven't thought about this before, it's definitely something to dig into. My personal hope for my kid is that he is either in late high school, and there's a whole lot of things. It's not a simple question. Like, we hope Milo is in later high school or college, that he's in love with his partner, that they have protection and a plan, that they are open communication, they're in a good and healthy relationship. So that's what we say to him, and that's what we talk about with him. So you need to know your values about when you think it's okay for someone to become sexually active. If you believe that it's not okay that sex isn't okay until marriage, then that's great, but bear in mind that marriage has never been compelling to a horny and in love 16-year-old. So you need to talk about why it is that it's marriage. Why is marriage the goal? You know, why is being in love the goal? Why is being older the goal? And, you know, I noticed that Anna's saying, I've struggled with this, but I'm hoping at least 18 years old, right? And, you know, we're not going to be able to predict or pick when our kids have sex, but what we can do is help them be set up so that they are successful and they make good choices, and that they're in a good situation with their partner. So that means a lot of getting them prepped now. All right, so moving on. Okay, yeah, high school and a committed relationship, college, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think most of us really hope our kids are sometime in there. Like, if we could pick, I would really say like late teens, early 20s seems good enough. You know, I always joke 29, 30 is probably smarter, but that's super duper rare. Okay, so if you aren't breathing, feel free to breathe. If you have any questions so far, feel free to ask questions. And let's talk about the next piece of this, which is more about sexuality and sexual activity straight up. So this is, I want to talk a bit about the physical side of sex, and then we'll talk about the social and emotional side of sex. So here's one overriding rule that your kids should know. Sex equals plan. So sex equals planning. I really think it's important for kids to understand, especially in this age group, that yeah, you can have sex spontaneously, but really when you're learning to have sex, when your first time is happening, that it's better and safer for everyone if you have a plan in place. And you know, that plan in place can be, I want to be in college, I want to be in love, I want this, I want that, I want that. So you know, because of our alarmingly high rate of teen pregnancy in the United States, we're number one. Woo! Yeah, highest teen pregnancy rate in the industrialized world. Thank you very much. And the correspondingly high rate of sexually transmitted infections, which I will share with you in just a moment. It's really important that we pretty much ram this down our kids' throats, that sex, spontaneously having sex, especially for the first time, is really not a good idea. And that as a life lesson or plan, you know, what am I thinking, as a value in your life, that you should plan for sex. So your kids should definitely know that not having sex is the best way to prevent pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. So yay, don't do it, no real risk. When we're talking about sex, of course, we all know that there's, you know, parts going in holes and that kind of sex, but there's also other sexual activity like, you know, well, oral sex I consider sex, but you know, touching and all kinds of things that can spread some germs. So that's something to be aware of. But I think generally speaking, between 9 and 12, you really want to be clear that super simple to not get pregnant, not get an STD. Don't, you know, have sex. Ta-da! I am a huge proponent of birth control, and I think that even if you're not into your kids being put on birth control, I think girls should be put on birth control about their sophomore year of high school, because the average age of first sex is 17. This is my personal value, and I know that there are plenty of medical folk who agree with me. The takeaway should be that your kids know all about the different kinds of birth control and where to get them. I know it seems weird to tell your 11-year-old, like, hey, you can talk to your doctor when you're ready, or you can go to Planned Parenthood when you think you're ready to have sex, and you can always tell me, because one of the rules in our family is that we don't do unplanned pregnancy. In my house, we are not going to be doing unplanned pregnancy. Now, I know I cannot control my kid, and I know you cannot control your kids, but we can set them up to be really successful on this front. So starting now, starting introducing the idea of birth control, making sure your kids understand that women can have sex, people can have sex, and the woman doesn't have to get pregnant. She can use birth control. And explain to her that birth control is either medication, or there are things that women can put in their uteruses, or men can use condoms that prevent women from becoming pregnant. That's the fact of it, right? Remember, facts and values. Value? Yes. Yes, use birth control. Birth control is required if you're going to be having sex with someone and they can become pregnant. I think that when they understand this from an early age, it definitely increases the likelihood that they will actually use birth control. If you have a family value that is that you don't do unplanned pregnancy, that pregnancy is planned, that's your value, pregnancy is planned. We don't, you know, we're stopping all of the whoops pregnancies with you, child. And I know 50% of you had unplanned pregnancies. That's the stat. So it's too high, because, you know, I don't know if you noticed that this parenting thing, not always super fun, It's hard, it's work. And so make sure your kids understand that. So here's the thing also about understanding about birth control and condoms is this statistic: 1 in 4 No, sad, frowny face. 1 in 4 US teenagers has a sexually transmitted infection. Highest rate in the developed world. They have herpes, HPV, trichomoniasis, and chlamydia. So good news, we just got good news on the HPV vaccine. So they've been providing it for 10 years now, I think, and there has been a 64% reduction in HPV in teenage girls. Did you hear me? 64% reduction. HPV causes cervical cancer, it causes mouth cancer, vaginal cancer, anal cancer, penile cancer. So the vaccine appears to be preventing the transmission of HPV. No, not the transmission. The transmission of HPV. So this is really, really good news. And I know not everybody's a vaccinator, and you need to talk to your doctor and do your own real research with real medical science, not just somebody's blog or me. Don't have to listen to me. But so it's really exciting. But right now, 1 in 4 teenagers with a sexually transmitted infection is way too frickin' high because they go untreated, and which can lead to fertility problems later on down the line, which nobody cares about when they're 12, but they do when they're 25. So starting the conversation now, explaining that when people have sex, they can pass germs, kind of like cold or flu, and they get in their private parts, and sometimes they're treatable and sometimes they're not. The older your child is, the more details you're going to give them. So this is not a, you don't want to jump into the conversation with like your 9-year-old and say, if you have sex, you'll get sick and die. No, you don't want to say that. With your 10-year-old, your 9-year-old, you want to just say, hey, people pass germs kind of when they have sex because their bodies are so close together and there's body fluids and sometimes people get sick. That's the deal. And the way you don't get sick is for the man to use a condom, to know your partner really well, to wait until you know your partner really well, to not have sex until you're 30, whatever it takes. I'm just kidding about that last thing. So again, this is really important for them because we're planting seeds, right? You want your kid to be the smartest kid in middle school. You want your kid to be like a walking mini, not joy of sex, but you want them to be a walking mini encyclopedia of sexuality because it's just safer for them to have this information from you from an early age. It should be no-brainer. And sometimes I think this can be really daunting, but the reality is it's more daunting to deal with a kid who's pregnant or has a sexually transmitted infection or is just running circles because they don't understand what's happening and what their peers are talking about. So a couple other things. They need to know that it's totally normal to masturbate and it's totally normal not to masturbate. Everyone should know that both boys and girls masturbate, that it's a very typical and healthy sexual practice. I personally, as many of you already know, believe that it is super important for girls to masturbate because they need to know their own bodies. Boys' bodies are much simpler, really. I mean, it's all out there. They work it out pretty quickly. Girls don't often figure out that their clitoris feels awesome and can feel really super awesome. Again, if you're not a masturbating family, that's terrible. Let me try that again. If you're not comfortable with masturbation, when you talk to your kids about it, just be really careful about your tone and understand that 97% of people masturbate. Like pretty much everybody masturbates at some point in their life. And so you need to talk to your kids about in a calm and reasonable way so they feel okay. And I think that, one of the really important parts of masturbation especially for adolescents is that it's a huge way to relieve their sexual tension. I would much rather have my kid wanking in his bedroom than having sex with some girl, frankly. That's just me. Lastly, I already said, got to get the vaginal sex thing out of the way ASAP. If you need to go text your child, track down your child, wake up your child, tell them penis goes in vagina, usual way, please do that. Get that out of the way. These guys, do you see them? Hi, oral and anal sex. You have to talk to them about oral and anal sex. So here's the good news about these. Sorry, see how much I love you? I know this is hard. The good news about these is that you don't have to talk to them about oral and anal sex in this age range unless they ask you straight up. So if your 10-year-old comes home and says, Mom, what is a blowjob? You have to explain. One of my clients' sons came home from school, and they were in the kitchen, and what was the story? Let me think. Her 2 boys were home from school, and something was going on in the kitchen, and one called the other a fag, and that's right. One called the other a fag, and the mom was like, hey, we don't talk like that in our family. And the other kid, one of her sons was like, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. And then a little later, he came back to her and said, so, Mom, how do 2 men have sex anyway? And she said, why do you ask? And he said, well, we were talking about it on the playground, and we just couldn't figure out how things worked. And so she said, Amy, I took a deep breath and I channeled you. And she explained about oral sex and anal sex to her 10-year-old son, because she knew he was going to hear it. Later, he might Google it. He was going to ask the wrong person. And so she took care of it. So if your under 10-year-old asks you straight up, you need to answer. And the other part of her conversation with him was that it's something they agree to do. It's not something you ever have to do. And it's also not something that it's okay for you to talk with other kids about, because people are really uncomfortable with this and they feel funky. So we don't want people to feel uncomfortable. So you can talk to me about it. So you need to get this out of the way before middle school. So that's like 6th grade. Summer of 5th grade, if they haven't asked, you need to bring it up. I talk to myself in the car out loud before I have to talk to Milo about things that make me uncomfortable. So I get it. It's a good time to kind of hear yourself and figure out what you're going to say. Excuse me. So yeah, you got to get those out of the way, but not at 9 unless they ask. Really 11, 12, good time to answer, good time to fill them in. So that's the physical parts of sex. So I also wanted to talk a little bit more about the social and emotional parts of sexuality, which are a little broader. And I think that this is one of the things that we really need to be open with kids about between the ages of 9 and 12, sexual attraction. So some people call this sexual orientation. And so I prefer sexual attraction because I think it actually is more, it's more accurate. So what I'm talking about is being gay, straight, or bi, or gayish, straightish, bi-ish, or bi-ish, gayish, straight, or fully straight, fully bi, fully gay. Because sexual attraction is really it's on a continuum, and there really isn't. There are very few people who are totally straight, 100% straight, and 100% gay, and 100% bi. Most people are inside a little bit either direction. So when you talk to your kids about being gay or straight or bi, and you may use those words, and you can do this kind of whenever you want in this age range, probably sooner rather than later, because of course everybody these days hears about people who are gay. And that's very common to hear about gay families, and lots of us have gay friends and family members, and so it's important to talk about it really soon. So when you talk to kids about sexual attraction, just say that. Say sometimes people are interested in having sex with people who are the same sex as them. Sometimes people like to have romantic relationships and sexual relationships with the person who is the opposite sex of them, or sometimes people will say the other sex. And or, interestingly, sometimes people are interested in people of the same sex and people of the opposite sex, and that's called being bisexual. Most people are one way or the other, either mostly straight or gay. You know, you will learn this about yourself. You may already know this about yourself. It's something that can change a little bit over time, but the biggest thing your kids need to know, absolutely, even if you are fundamentally opposed to not being straight, is that you love your child no matter who they are, no matter who they love, no matter who they're attracted to. Part of the reason I like to say sexual attraction is because, again, it's it's not so cut and dried. And I think one of the things that's, I'm going to kind of go a little sideways here because I just think this is interesting. Sorry. One of the things I think is happening in particular for girls is that they're seeing a lot of porn now in adolescence, and they watch porn and it's almost always involves a woman or two women having sex with each other, and they get sexually stimulated. And so they think, oh, that must mean I'm bi. The reality is it means that maybe they're bi, maybe they're gay, maybe they're neither. The reality is that it just means that they're stimulated by seeing women having sex. And so I'm not telling you to go into this crazy detail with your 9 to 12-year-old. I'm just telling you this for your future knowledge, kind of like the brain on the palm of the hand thing, flip, flip. When they understand that it's okay to be, that just means you're stimulated by seeing women have sex. It's very, very common. The reality is they're probably more one way than the other, and they just need to take a pause and really think about that for themselves. And again, sexual attraction can change over time and over years, and people get more comfortable or less comfortable or whatever with who they are. So talking about that with your kids is going to be really helpful to them, especially as our culture gets more and more and more open about sexuality and sexualities, which is really what I'm talking about, sexualities. So that's really important, that gay, straight, bi thing. Good luck with that. But wait. Let's get even more confusing. I know, you're like, yay, Amy. Gender. So this is another piece of sexuality that we really need to get a grip on so we can talk to our kids about it. So you'll notice I have cis, fluid, and trans. So let's talk about this, shall we? Gender is something that is very confusing to people. So a person's gender is both intrinsic to who they are. It is a natural, fundamental part of who they are, how they feel. And it's also a cultural and social thing as well, how they show up socially and culturally in the world, okay? So cisgender, C-I-S gender, is the word that you may have never heard, and I'm just gonna use me as an example. So a cisgender person is a person like me who has a female body, that's my sex, excuse me, I'm a female, I'm in a female body, that's my sex, and my gender, I am identified with women and girls. So I am gender identified as a woman or a girl. I like the things women and girls do. I identify with those things. I feel like a woman. I'm not gonna sing. I feel like a woman. It feels right to me. I feel right in my body. Everything is aligned. So I'm aligned with my gender, and my gender and my sex are aligned. So that's being cisgender. Someone who's transgender, if I were transgender, I would be in my female body, but I would identify with and like the things that men and boys do. I would feel fundamentally like a man or a boy on the inside. That would feel right to me. And here I am in this body with hips and boobs and periods. Ugh, sorry. So I'm in the wrong body. So transgender person is a person like Bruce Jenner is transgender, and now he's Caitlyn Jenner, because he was in a male body, and inside he felt like and identified with women and girls. This is not for you to understand. This is just to help you. It's confusing. People struggle with this. I get it. But your kids are going to be hearing about this, so you need to have a little bit of an understanding of it. So the last thing is gender fluid. So a person who's gender fluid is someone who kind of has feet in one or the other camps. They kind of go, maybe sometimes they're more masculine identifying and looking, so they feel like more manly or more boyly, or they're more female, womanly or girly, so they're kind of fluid back and forth. Sometimes these people are called gender non-conforming. Most people prefer gender fluid, so their gender is much more fluid. You know, my gender is pretty rigid, but everyone has a little bit of, you know, a little bit of the opposite gender or the other gender in their, you know, in their world. Like my hair is super short usually. It's really long right now. I know, and you're like, that hair is short, sister. So we all have a little bit of the other gender that we work with. So Your kids have got to understand this. So there's an excellent resource, and I'm going to type it over here because that's how kind I am. I want you all to look up a genderbread person 3.0. Ta-da! It is a really helpful infographic that will explain some of this to you. So I'm belaboring this point because this is a big ass deal in our culture right now, and your kids need to be savvy, because if they are struggling with their sexual attraction, if they're struggling with their gender, they need you to help them sort it out. And so there are really good books out there now about gender and about sexual attraction. There's lots of information. If you have a kiddo that's struggling or you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I really want you to feel good and confident about this part of life. And I'll leave you with one last thing. Gender fluid and not kids who identify as not straight, those kids have extremely high suicide rates. And one of the leading indicators of their overall health and not killing themselves is their family support. So gotta get that family support going now, because you're the one who needs help more than your child does to support your child. Maybe. Anyway, sorry, I kind of tangented there. All right, I know this has been super fun, and I have a few more things to talk about that are not so fun. So we want to talk about safety. So a big part of being savvy and sexually savvy and safe is talking about some really uncomfortable stuff. And one of the most uncomfortable things to talk with your kids about is sexual abuse. So you need to be talking with your children about sexuality and safety from a very early age. Unfortunately, this lovely little statistic, age 9, this is the average age a child is sexually abused. I remember when I learned that, how old I thought it was. And so the reason I'm telling you is because your kids are in this prime, unfortunate time of being potential victims. And so I want to give you some quick tips to help you keep them safe. One of the first things you need to do is, if you've been teaching your children to be afraid of strangers, it's time to stop that. 90% of the time, the person who molests or sexually assaults a child is known to them. It's not a stranger. Very, very rarely is it a stranger. So you need to back up the truck. My friend Kim Estes runs a wonderful company called Savvy Parents Safe Kids. You can go to her website, Savvy Parents Safe Kids. It's also linked on my website, on my resources page, and download her Super 10 Rules for Safety. This is one of the best things you can do for your kids to help them learn how to be safe when they're out and about in the world. And she's got more information there. So it's time to undo the stranger danger thing. Strangers are not going to mess with your kids. And when you teach kids to be afraid of strangers, you're teaching them to be afraid of help. You're also teaching them to disregard their natural intuition. So this is one of the biggest gifts you can give your kids, is to talk to them about if they feel uncomfortable around somebody. One of the things you can do is when they go over to somebody's house for a play date, is you can ask them, how'd it go? What'd you do? What was the best part? What was the worst part? Anything feel uncomfortable? And that will tell you. And they'll say, yeah, the older brother kept coming in to play Barbies with us. Oh, how old is he? 16? And this is with your 10-year-old. It's like, yeah. Do 16-year-old boys play Barbies with 10-year-old girls? Only for pay. Like, no. So you want to start asking questions like that. If your kiddo tells you they don't like to be with someone, then you don't let them be with that someone, because usually there's something off about that person for them. There's some reason they're uncomfortable. So you need to be really working with them around trusting their guts. So that's really important to start talking to them about, oh, do you have that uh-oh feeling, trusting their guts, making sure that they know that you believe them if they say something feels uncomfortable. And I think one of the things with older kids too to talk about is this idea of too good to be true. Is this situation too good to be true? So for you, if you're a single parent and you meet somebody and it's a new person in your life and he's like, oh my God, I'll be happy to pick your kids up after school for you, and you don't know him very well, it's too good to be true. With your 11-year-old daughter who's being texted by an 8th grade boy, too good to be true, right? As your kids get older, does this feel too good to be true? And it's your intuition. And usually your intuition is very rarely wrong. I know you all know that, and we're really good at ignoring it. So you want your kids to have sharply, finely tuned intuition. A couple other things is that you should be really clear with your kids about their adults in their lives' job roles. So it's the teacher's job to teach class, not to give them rides home from school. It's the coach's job to coach soccer, not put sunscreen on them. See what I'm saying? So if somebody's doing something outside of their job role, something to pay attention to. So the last thing is this. Sorry. You really want to make sure your kids know who their safe adults are. So this is a time to have a conversation with them and say, so if you were having a problem and you didn't feel comfortable telling me or your dad or your other parent for whatever reason, who could you confide in? And then see what they say. So oftentimes it's going to be a longtime family friend, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent. And so then you say, that's great. So those people are your safe adults. And if you are comfortable with them being safe adults, then you say, you know, so those are the people you go to. Like sometimes kids like to test out first to make sure they're not going to get in big trouble. So, you know, talk to your Auntie Sean about something if you have a question. She'll have your back. And if you need help, she'll make sure you get help. And, you know, you'll probably need to tell me, but, you know, we'll figure that out. So you want your kids to know who their safe adults are. That's really important. And those get changed up every now and again. But family life changes, right? So who's your safe adult? And then the last part of this is that if something happens to them, someone touches them inappropriately, shows them porn, does something that makes them feel really uncomfortable, and is potentially sexually abusive, they need to tell an adult, tell one of their safe adults. If they're not believed, they need to tell another safe adult. And they need to keep telling until someone believes them. And I have told Milo that I will always believe him because I want him to know that I really am a safe adult. And kids false report only about 6% of the time. So that means 94% of the time they're telling the truth. So if your child says, Uncle Creepy touched my vulva, you believe her. And I know how hard this can be. It can cause a complete and total shitstorm in your family life or in your culture or in your neighborhood life. But it's more important that your child is safe and protected than the adult is, frankly. That's just my 2 cents worth. So this is totally a bummer, but you have to talk about it. And my favorite book for kids in this age group called It's So Amazing by Roby Harris has an awesome section on sexual abuse and body safety. She just hits the nail on the head. It's really, really good. And on my website, on my books page, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's some other books for kids about being safe and boundaries. It's such an important conversation to continue to have with your kids because it's lifelong protection. It's lifelong protection. And you know, and actually I'm just going to throw this in there too. And so part of this too is talking about consent. So what is consent? What does consent look like? And with kids, you don't have to talk about sexual consent per se. You can talk about consent in terms of, hey, if anybody ever wants to give you a hug, you have the right to say no, right? Like you need to say yes to somebody physically touching you. So let's practice. Hey, can I give you a hug? And your kid says no. And then you say, all right, no problem. How about a high five? And your kid says no. And you say, okay, no problem. So you need to model that that consent behavior. And then it can roll into talking about consent with sex. And so the new model of consent is yes means yes. So you need to, your child needs to have a wholehearted yes, and their partner needs to have a wholehearted yes. So if it's a no for anyone, then it's a no. So the consent seeds need to be planted now too. Okay, this is all gloom and doom, sorry. Oh, and then the porn thing. You gotta talk about porn. Like absolutely, by 9 or 10, people watch videos of people having sex online. There's videos online of people having sex. It's not okay for you to watch that. It's not safe. It can be really confusing and upsetting to kids because sex is not for kids. You need to talk about it pretty regularly. You need to talk about how it can impact their brains. And I actually have a book that I'm actually just going to go get. So I'll be right back. Hang on. Pause if you have questions because it looks pretty good actually for this age group talking about pornography. Hang on. Look at that. It's called, oh, sorry, it's there. It's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And it talks about what happens in the brain when kids see porn. It gives advice about what they can do if they see it. It's pretty good. Any kind of these books about sexual abuse and this kind of thing, they're always a little like, ugh. but this is actually okay. You can get it on Amazon. And I actually think that the people who wrote it are local. So definitely worthwhile investment, especially because it talks about the brain chemistry and the brain science, which is really interesting. So yeah, you have to have the porn conversation. It's unavoidable. It is part of our lives now, so you can't not have it. So 9 to 12, get on it consistently. My usual rant about you need to be monitoring, use monitoring software, parental controls, all of that on all your devices, because your kids are going to see porn. They will see porn. This is the time between 9 and 12. Yay, Amy. And I know this is people are gonna see this at different times. We do have, I have a class coming up this Sunday, which in Seattle, about how to talk to kids about porn, and Joe Langford and I will also do a webinar together about talking to kids about pornography. So if this is where you like to learn from me, we'll do a porn talk. We haven't done it in a while, so we will do that. And Lama, yes, kids can read the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures book for sure, but it's something you want to read yourself first, just so you can see what they talk about. And I like that. I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. Milo read it. He said it was okay, but he will, he'd say that about anything because he's my child who will never talk to me about sex. Okay, so let's wrap this baby up. We got just a few minutes. I think I'm just gonna do this really quickly. So the last piece, the last two things are this. You've got to talk to them about really tough topics. You need to talk to them about rape and abortion. They need to know about sex work. Because these are parts of our culture, we hear about them. Your kids have probably heard those words at some point, and it's just safer for you to get them out of the way and talk to them about what those different things mean. On my website, on my video page, I have a whole series of tough topics videos. So I give you the script for talking about a whole bunch of different things: oral and anal sex, all kinds of things: birth control, abortion, rape, pornography. So it's a really easy way. They're totally free for you to go and watch, write it down, read it to yourself, and tell your kids when you're driving down the road in the car. Find a quiet moment where you can get this tough stuff out of the way. So definitely need to tackle those harder parts, because the reality is they are part of sexuality, but they're not the whole tamale. They're just a small piece of it, and your kids need to know, and they need to know from you. I don't know when the webinar with Joe will be. I haven't talked to him about it, so when I see him, we'll figure it out. Probably, probably April or May, so I'm not 100% sure. It just depends on our schedules. So, but thank you for asking. It's a good one. Okay, so here's the last thing. The last thing is your expectations. Your kids need to know this. We talk about sex in our family. You should set that up as their expectation of you, that you talk about sex in this talk. We talk about sex in our family. This is a topic that is on the table. We are not going to be quiet about this. We're going to make sure you're super well informed. So you need to make sure your kids know and say that to them. We talk about this. It's going to get uncomfortable. It's also going to be really funny. And this is how we roll in our family, because I know you want your kids to grow up to be whole, healthy, and safe. So talking about sexuality is part of that whole and healthy adulthood, right? As we know. Okay, whew. All right, so I'm gonna take a sip of tea. If you have questions, please go ahead and type them over there. I saw a couple of them. So there are a bunch of books on my website that I recommend for this age group. So if you go to birdsandbeesandkids.com and go to my books page, scroll to the bottom of the page, is a little Amazon bookstore, and you can search by age group. So for this particular age group, I highly recommend a book for puberty, a book about puberty for boys, a book about puberty for girls, and also It's So Amazing. So that combo pack is going to get your kid through about into fifth grade. After fifth grade, I want you to change it up to this book. It's Perfectly Normal. This is my favorite book, one of my favorite books. Covers everything. So if you're rusty, this is your friend. Read it now, sooner rather than later. And then I also have books for kids who are older, because the kids who are older need more explicit information about sex and sexuality. So those are the books I recommend. I'm just going to scoot back here. There was something that came up. Oh yeah, the amygdala, the word for the brain thing. So that's really fun to go look up. It's Dan Siegel, it's Seigl, and Brain in the Palm of the Hand. It's a really amazing, it's a really great way to learn about what's happening in adolescent brains. He also wrote a book called Brainstorm that I really, really enjoyed. So I'll just give you a couple minutes more, and while you're sorting out your sweet brains, I know I just dump all this information. So I think I'm just going to review really quickly. So you want to think about this in terms of bodies and brains, relationships, sexuality, the physical stuff. So by the time they're 12, they should know all the physical stuff, like how things happen, how things work. They should know about the social and emotional stuff. So I just touched on the gender and the sexual attraction. It's also the dating and relationship stuff that all kind of comes under the social and emotional piece as well. Lots of conversations about safety. This is one of the more vulnerable times in your kid's life because they're starting to go out in the world. And so you need to have them have a good toolkit. So check out savvyparentssafekids.com for that. And then get that tough stuff out of the way, right? Get that tough stuff out of the way sooner rather than later. You are the best person for your kid to learn this from because you're the safest place for them to be uncomfortable. And so just remember that there might be some discomfort, and so I want your kids to feel as comfortable as they can be talking about the tough stuff. And then that expectation. Your kids should expect you to talk about sex. Okay, yay, questions. Okay, let's see. Everill, all right, my kid probably doesn't know that porn exists. Do you think there's a danger that bringing it up out of the blue would spark curiosity, talking to friends, and maybe a hey, let's Google it situation? So, sure, of course, there's a chance that that could happen. But when you talk to them about porn, really be clear that it is not for kids, it's not safe, it's not okay, it can be very scary and confusing, that sex is not for kids, and that the rule in your family. So kids in this age group, believe it or not, are actually very rules oriented. So you say the rule in our family is that kids don't look at this stuff because it can really mess with your head. You can't unsee things. And we want you to grow up to be a really whole, healthy person when it comes to sex and relationships. So you're gonna say all that. And you're gonna say, and you're probably gonna see it. So here's the deal. Let me know. You won't be in trouble, but I do want to check in with you. And please let me know if another kid shows you, because that could mean that they could have a problem with it. Sometimes people can get addicted to pornography. It's the easiest way to talk about it. Sorry, sorry, I have judgment about that. So sometimes kids can get addicted, people can get addicted to it. It's just not safe or healthy. It's kind of like drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes. It's grown-up stuff. And then you do this, and then they're gonna do what they're gonna do. So at your house, you have lockdown parental controls. At your house, you have monitoring software. And you tell your kids we have monitoring software to make sure you're safe online, because that's what it's all about. It's not spying. So it's a great question. Okay. Oh, 10-year-old is dating a boy I don't trust. How do I explain this to her simply? Okay, so Allison, is he the same age? So there's that. So, and same, if you just let me know, same age. So what you can say to her is, so when you say to your kid, I don't like that boy, what's she gonna do, right? She's gonna run towards him. So you need to ask her questions like, what do you like about him? Do you want him to come over and hang out? Let's have him be part of our family. And let's extend a hand to him. And that way she can get to know him better in a different way and see what it is that maybe you don't trust about him. And then have conversations that are not about him, that are about trust. And you can say things like, one of the things I really loved about my first boyfriend is that I could just depend on him, because when he said he was going to be there at 9, by God, he was there at 9. When he said he was going to pick me up from school, he picked me up. He was so, consistent and trustworthy. When we were, making out and I said stop, he always stopped, like whatever. So you want to demonstrate trust to her, what that looks like without mentioning this kiddo. But I'm going to see. Yeah, same age. Okay. And so remember, this is practice. You don't want to say that to her, but it's practice, right? And she's not going to marry him, I hope. So invite him into your family. Invite him into your family. Okay. 9-year-old has been reading It's Perfectly Normal and got scared about HIV. Of course. I had to talk with her about what it is and the prevention. Also that you can get it when you don't have sex. Ugh, it was a lot for her. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I don't recommend giving It's Perfectly Normal to 9-year-olds, because it's a lot. If I were you, I would just touch base with her again and say, hey, I just want to let you know that it is actually pretty hard to get HIV, which is true. And that when you're ready to have sex, you're going to have so many conversations with me and with your partner that the chance of that happening to you is going to be incredibly, incredibly slim. So please, just say, just so you know, it's not like you go out and sneeze and you got it. So just reiterate to her that that she can be safe and not have sex, and maybe get It's So Amazing or put the book up for a while so she can kind of recover. It's quite a load for a 9-year-old for sure. So hard on you too, I know. So thanks, Anne. Childbirth and labor. All right, she's seen a video and finds it stimulating. Interesting. I'm confused and not sure how to approach it. Did she say she found it stimulating? Or, sorry, why don't you go down there at the bottom? It says to everybody, if you don't want to be super public or if you don't care, I mean, it's just your name. What was stimulating? Because that's curious to me. How did you know that? So it could be, yeah. Okay, so you just want to have a little conversation with her about a couple different things. So first of all, that people find all kinds of things stimulating, and that when they do, if they're going to be looking at something like that, that for kids it's not safe to be watching videos and touching themselves because it's too mature. It's too much information for her. So this is sort of a little masturbation conversation on. I'm going to deal with the other thing in a second. So I just want to say, people find all different kinds of things stimulating. It's really interesting. But here's the thing. When you masturbate or when you want to touch your privates, it's totally cool to do. It's something people do in private alone. And kids, they just use their imaginations. They don't look at videos. So that can really mess them up because you need your imagination to learn how to be a really good sexual person, which is true. So with the childbirth thing, I don't know. It could be wiring. I can poke around and see if I've heard anything. If you want to send me an email, and I can see if I can figure anything out. Honestly, I just think that people get turned on by different things. It could just be the vagina that she's seeing. It could just be the intensity, and the whole thing is kind of overwhelming, and so it just sort of ends up feeling stimulating. Yeah, I need to think about it. That would be my guess, actually. There's something about her whole body gets stimulated. How old is she? That would be good for me to know, too. Feels funny down there. Oh, okay. Too late. Okay, that's cool. And you can just say, yeah, sometimes that happens, and just let it go. But make sure she's, don't let her masturbate to the video, because it just sets up a... So that's totally normal. It's kind of funny. Our bodies sometimes react differently to different things. Have the masturbation chat, send her off to her room, no screens for that. Yeah, interesting. Thank you for asking that. I think I've heard it all, and guess what? Now I have. Thank you. Okay. Oh, thanks, Chris. So yeah, Custodio is really good monitoring software. So that's the monitoring software we use. It's really awesome. It's on every device that Milo accesses, and you get an email digest every day of every place he's been. You can block apps. You can put it on the things, the phone, the pad, all that. It's been a really good. It's been a really, really good tool in our family. And again, it's a pain in the ass. You got to see what they're up to. You got to lock it down because you want them safe online at your house. And if everybody's got kid-safe stuff online at their house, every other kid is going to be safer. So it's kind of like a mission of mine to get everybody to lock it down. So great questions. Hey, we are pretty much over time. I'm not surprised. One last little thing. So if you are curious, hang on a second. about what else you should be talking to your kids about in more detail, I have this little video. It's called The Birds and Bees from Age 2 to Age 12. It's $10, and it spells out everything they need to know from 2 to 12, including what's developmentally appropriate and what's developmentally not typical. So some of what I taught tonight is from that. If you're feeling like you're behind and you want to get caught up, this is absolutely the easiest way to do that. It's about an hour long. You can start and stop it, watch it over and over again, and it basically will help you to have age-appropriate conversations and also prevent you from giving your kids too much information. So if you're interested in that, you can just click on the little buy now button, or if if you're not, whatever, you can always learn from me like this. And again, if you have questions or need more support or help, please feel free to call or email me. It's amy@birdsandbeesandkids.com. And like I said, I want to help 1 million kids grow up to be whole, healthy adults. So please spread the word about me, share my stuff on the Facebook, and do the thing that will help your kids the most, which is be open with them about sexuality. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be really fun and funny, I promise. Okay, thank you very much. And let's see, what else have we got? Oh, one last quickie. Can you talk to your boys at the same time? Totally. 9 and 11, yeah, lay it out. Tell the 11-year-old, sometimes we're going to need to have conversations that are separate from your brother, but you can do all the basic stuff together. And you know your kid's temperament. So some kids are super modest and it may not work for them, but yeah, have as many conversations with your kids at the same time, as long as they're pretty close in age, because parenting is hard. Why not just make it easier? Okay, thank you so much. Oh, thank you, Alex. I love hearing that. Yay, I'm glad. Yay, Chris, empowered and excited. Oh, you're making my night. You're making my night. Yay, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to say good night and see you later to the rest of you who are watching the recording, and take care.